Thank you all so much for joining us today. This is Meika from Liner Team, and we're really happy that you all are here. And if you're very new to us, we are Liner. Liner builds AI-powered tools, including AI search and AI agents for researchers and academia, helping you work and research smarter. So sessions like today are part of our mission to support the research community. So I'm really glad that you all are here today. Today, we're diving into how to write a clear, structured, and publishable research paper with Dr. Fahim here today. And without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Faheem Ullah, Assistant Professor at the University of Adelaide, and one of the most influential voice in AI research. So yeah, Dr. Fahim, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, you can take over.
Great. Thank you, Mecca. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, depending upon which part of the world you're joining. So I'll share my screen. Mecca, can you please confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So today in this webinar, we are gonna talk about how to write a research paper. So I believe that uh, almost all of you come from research background. You are either PhD student or a postdoc or an academic or maybe a master's level student. So essentially at the end of the webinar, you would have learned that what is this, the structure of a research paper, how do we write each part of a research paper, and then how can we automate some parts of writing a research paper using AI tools like Liner. So in this webinar, first we'll sort of contextualize the discussion and have a common understanding of what research papers are, why we write them, and then after that we will come towards the types of research papers, the structure of research paper, and then how do research papers are reviewed. And lastly, we'll end the session with some best practices for writing research papers. So if you look at this one, this is the whole process of research. So we start with formulating our research questions and hypotheses. Any research that we do, it essentially is trying to answer some research question, produce some new findings. Now, after we define our questions, like for example, as a PhD student, you start with answering some questions, like you might be interested in answering the question that what is the impact of AI on education? Or the question could be that what is the impact of climate change on global economy? Now, once you have the focus and the question defined, in that case, the next step is that you go and you collect data. Now you can collect data through different methods. For example, you can run a questionnaire, you can do interviews, you can do field study, you can do some experiments to collect data. After you collect data, you analyze data. Now for analysis also, there are different methods. For example, you can, if your data is quantitative data, meaning numbers, you would use some kind of quantitative analysis. If your data is qualitative, meaning, for example, interview data or data from observations or some workshops, in that case, you do qualitative data analysis through different methods, like for instance, thematic analysis or open coding and so on. Once you do the analysis, this produces your findings against the question that you have already defined. And the last part comes that, okay, now you have to report your findings in the form of a research paper. And that is where our focus is today. So we are not going to talk about how we can collect data, how we can analyze data, or how we can articulate our findings. We are going to most focus on how we can report our findings in the form of a research paper. Now, when we talk about research papers, there are different types of research papers. Primarily, they can be divided into two types. One is primary research paper, another one is secondary research paper. Now, primary research papers are then further divided into different categories. But what exactly is primary research paper? It is when we do primary research. For example, we do some experiment, we do interviews, we do questionnaires, we do some kind of field study, collect data, and then report the findings. That is a primary research paper, which is going to be the focus of today's webinar. Then we also have secondary research papers, which are reviews. We call them secondary research papers, or we call them reviews. In this case, we study the primary research papers. So for example, I want to understand a field of study. Let's suppose I want to understand about deep learning models used in healthcare domain. In that case, I will collect, say, around 100 primary research papers and then write a review of that. So in today's session, we are going to mostly talk about that how we can write primary research papers. And then, as I mentioned, that primary research papers are then again of various types, but what we will cover in today's session, that will be applicable to almost all types of primary research papers. Now, when we talk about a paper, so the first question would come as to what should be the parts of a research paper. So a research paper generally has a title, and after the title comes the abstract, then introduction, literature review, research methodology, results discussion, conclusion. Now here, I will very briefly talk about each of them, and then down the line, we will go into more depth at how exactly we can write each of them. Now, abstract, essentially, you provide a brief summary of what you have done. So somebody reads your abstract and they can determine that whether this research paper is relevant to them or not. In the introduction part, you open up your abstract. You go into a bit broader context. When I personally read introduction section of a paper, I am mainly looking for one question to be answered. And that is that why this research has been done. What is the motivation for this work? That is what I want to get out of introduction. What I want to see personally in an introduction section is that are there solid justifications, references, evidences provide which can justify the research being carried out. In literature review section, what we do is that we talk about the existing studies. So here, I personally, when I read the literature review section of a paper, I want to see that whether or not you have positioned the novelty of your research with respect to existing research. If I could see a kind of clear difference that, okay, here are these 10 or 15 papers relevant to your work, they have done this thing, but here is something that was missing in those papers, and you have filled that gap through your research. That is the main purpose of literature review. The fourth part is research methodology. Now, in this part, what I personally want to see is whether you have conducted this research in the right way or not. If you have a very novel problem to solve, a novel research question to answer, and it is important as well, but if you have not done that research in the right way, again, your research would become questionable. For example, if you want to understand the impact of AI on education, and you go and collect data from farmers. So although the question is good, the topic is good, but the data of the people from whom you've collected the data is not relevant. For the impact of AI on education, you should collect data from students, you can collect data from academics, but farmers would not be relevant here. So in the research methodology section, what we want to see is that whether you have done the research in the right way or not. A research section where the entire meat of your research goes in that, okay, what did you found out? Then comes the discussion section where the author, the researcher reflects on the findings. What is good in these findings? What is not good in these findings? That part should go into the discussion section. And lastly, we conclude that what are the main findings and who can benefit from these findings. And we conclude with a larger vision statement that, okay, what could be done on the top of the research that we have carried out. So this is a broader summary of what should go into a research paper. And now we'll go into the depth of each of them, that how we can write. Before we go further, I just want to remind that if you have any questions about any part that we cover, you can put down the questions in the Q&A section. And then at the end, in the last 10 to 15 minutes, we'll take the questions and then I would be happy to answer those questions. Okay, now this is an analogy of for understanding what a research paper is and what are the different parts. So I'm sure that all of us here, we would have seen movies at some point. Now, I want to sort of give you, mapping between between a movie and a research paper. So a movie has a name, right? And then similarly, a paper has a title. Now, personally, I choose the titles of my papers very carefully because I think that the title in itself speaks for the paper. So what terms you use in the title, that is important. Like, for example, if my paper is about big data analysis, then I really want it to be there, the term big data, because that is how the search engines will pick up my paper. Or anybody who is doing a review of the field, they first do selection based on the title. So what my practice is that when I put title for my paper, I usually consult it or take feedback from 3-4 people to check what sort of comes to their mind when they read this title. Is it reflective of the research that I've reported or not? The next part is that a movie has a trailer, right? So before a movie gets released, the production team, they release the trailer, and the trailer is very appealing. It's very glamorous. It is something that tempts you to watch the movie. The same is the case with the abstract. The abstract should be like the trailer of a movie. It should be so interesting, so appealing that when I read the abstract, it should compel me that yes, I should also go and read the rest of the paper. Now, making it appealing, it does not mean that we should sort of overclaim things or we should say something that is not true about research. But at the same time, we should make it such that, like for instance, if in my case, if I see a typo error in abstract, I'm already sort of done with the paper because that is a small part. These are 250 words, and as a researcher, one would not expect that you would have made a grammar or typo mistake there. Similarly, if I do not see a clear objective in the abstract, again, I would be lost and I would not read the rest of the paper. So abstract, you need to look at it the way we look at the trailer of a movie. The next one is the opening scene. Now, you would have definitely seen movies that opens on a very, very strong sort of point. The scene directly connects with you and, it carries you forward. So in the same is the case with introduction, you need to open up your paper with very strong motivation. Bring in good justifications, bring in good references, bring in numbers, states that really, really motivates the research you have done. So that when I or any researcher read the introduction, they are directly connected, they see the value in this research, and then that pushes them to read the rest of the paper. Then for the movie also, we have like related movies. For example, some movies are as in comedy, as in action, as in romance, and so on and so forth. The same is with the paper. We have related works. A movie is not exclusive in the same way a research paper is not entirely exclusive. Then we have the movie production, that how this movie was made, right? And in the same way, we have research methodology, that how this research was conducted. So through the research methodology, we can verify that whether this research was conducted in the right way or not. And this gives us the confidence in the findings. For example, if I'm convinced that the research methodology is very rigorous, it is conducted in the right way, then I will wholeheartedly accept the findings. I will not take findings with a pinch of salt. Then there are main events in a movie, and in the same way we have results where we see the meat of the entire research, that okay, what are your findings. Then we have movie critique, that people who watch the movie, they say, okay, what was good in the movie, what was not good in the movie. In the same way, we have discussion of the paper, where the authors, they reflect that what was good in these results, what was not good in these results. And then we have an ending scene or a climax for a movie. In the same way, we have conclusion section for a research paper. So I hope that this would have given you a clear idea that what different section of a research paper should look like. Okay, starting with the abstract. So as I mentioned, that an abstract is like the trailer of a movie. Now, an abstract should have 6 parts. The first part should be the importance of the study. As you see in this example, that very briefly in 3 to 4 lines, it is mentioned that why the study is important. Then comes the gap statement, that what was missing in the literature. Then comes the objective, that okay, what is the main objective or goal of this research. Then very briefly we mentioned that the method which is used for conducting this research. Then comes the findings, that what we found out from the study, and the applications, that who will benefit from it, what is in it for researchers, what is in it for practitioners. These are the 6 parts that should be in your abstract, or in other words, these 6 parts make a good abstract for a paper. Okay, now coming to the introduction section. So introduction section, it essentially opens up the abstract. And the first part is the topic introduction. So sometimes you need to bring other researchers to the same page. You need to provide some context to them so that they understand that what exactly you are talking about. So in the introduction, you first introduce the topic, then you provide some background of the existing research, that okay, this study has done this thing, this study has done this thing. That helps you to establish the research problem that you're trying to solve. If you directly jump into a research problem that way, I would think that, like, it's either the research is super new, that nobody has touched it before, or the other way, I would think that you have not consulted the relevant literature. The fourth one is you mentioned about the objectives. Now, for instance, I've seen papers where sometimes people directly mention the research questions. I personally like that style when I see clear research questions, that okay, this research is answering these questions. Other way is that people mention about the objectives in one line, that okay, for example, or 2 lines, that this is the objective of the study. Whatever style you want to follow, but please be very crisp, very clear. If the objective of your study or the research questions are not clear to the reader, then it is, as a reviewer, it becomes very hard to buy into that research. The next part is the methodology. So very briefly, you mentioned, for example, how you collected data, how you analyze data. And then you present the outline of your research, that okay, in section 2 we will have the literature review, section 3 methodology, section 4 results, and so on and so forth. So I, as a reader, develop a map or an outline of your paper in my mind. Okay, now when you're writing introduction section, I have heard from multiple people that this is the section where a reader, or particularly a reviewer, decides the fate of your paper. That is this a paper that is going to fly or not. So you need to make sure that you give this section your best shot. Some tips that I can give you is that use very solid references to support your motivation. Now, what I mean by solid references is sometimes people put weak references. What could be a weak reference? A weak reference could be that if you cite something from a very unknown journal, or from a very unknown conference, or you put a link of a website. Now, oftentimes, depending upon the domain, but at least where I come from, we do not like references to blogs or to website. We like references to peer-reviewed research, which are papers. And then also sometimes people put very outdated reference. Like for example, the field of uh, computer science, it evolves very rapidly. Now, if somebody puts a reference that is from 1980s, in majority of the times it would look very outdated. The second point is that you do not need to make very big claims that your results can't support. So the problem is that when you start reading a research paper, you read abstract and then you read introduction. Some authors, they present it in a way that they have like done like some revolutionary research. They have done this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing. I have seen papers where when I read the introduction, I'm like, how could they even do this much of research and present it in one paper? This is the work of 10 papers. But then when you go down the line and you look at the results are in no way supporting all the claims that have been made in the introduction section. So here, my suggestion is that do not make claims that your results are not supporting. For example, if you are saying that you have uh, collected data from 3 continents to answer this question, and then I go and read the findings and the data has been only collected from, let's suppose, one country. So you see the results are not tallying with the claims you have made. So make sure that you remain a bit humble when you are saying things in your introduction section. The third point is that there is no glory in making things unnecessarily complex. In personally, and this is a view of many of my fellow researchers as well, that if I something I don't understand, um, despite trying to understand, then it might be the case that the author is unnecessarily complicated things. The next one is that you need to keep it like a flow. Avoid, this is something I've also observed many a times, that people, like when you finish one paragraph and you go to the other paragraph, the two paragraphs does not match at all. There is an abrupt jump, which as a reader we don't like. So give it a good flow. Connect the paragraphs with one another. Avoid typos. Again, introduction section being the start of your paper, it would give a very bad impression if we go and we have all these typos in the introduction section. And again, some introduction sections are unnecessarily lengthy. Keep it concise. Do not add unnecessary stuff in there. Now, we talked about the references and baking your statements with solid references. Uh, you might have all the references at your hand, but that's not the case often. If it's not the case, you have written an introduction and you want to insert relevant references in that particular introduction section, Liner has a feature for it. They call it citation recommender. Okay, and it's quite amazing. It just aids up relevant references to the text you have written. So we can have a look at the demo of how it works. So on the side, there is citation recommender. We click, we put our text in here, and then we say, okay, find citations. So you see that the text that we have added, it has added relevant references to those, and then you can see the details of those references. As you click on them, you can add them to your library. You can also change the citation style, like whichever citation style you're following, you can have the reference in that style. And this way you can easily add references to your papers. Okay, now the second part is about the literature review. So in this section, what you really need to do is that you need to show what other researchers have done, what is missing in their research, and how your research fills that gap. So for this section, to write this section, first you need to collect the relevant papers, then group them by theme, summarize each group, and most importantly is this fourth step. The most important, highlight what is missing, what are the limitations or gaps in those papers, in those relevant papers. And then number 5, you connect your work with the gap, that okay, there was this gap and this is how my paper is addressing or filling that gap. So for finding relevant papers and for summarizing them by themes, again, Liner, they have this feature literature review, which does an excellent job to identify the relevant papers, summarize them into different themes. Let's have a look how it works. So we click on literature review, we enter the topic of our paper. So it has identified the relevant papers. You see, these are the themes that based on, it has divided the papers into themes, and then it has written a short description of the themes, and then it has also written the opportunities or the gaps within that particular bunch of papers. Okay. The next section is the research methodology. So in the research methodology, as I mentioned earlier, that as a researcher, what you need to do is that you need to tell that how this research was conducted. The main purpose of it is that whether other researchers, if they follow the same steps, whether they would end up with the same findings or not, or whether or not your research is verifiable. So in the research methodology section, very briefly just mention the problem again, then describe the research method that you have used. Okay, and then talk about the data that you have collected. How did you collect the data? What the data looks like? What is the size of the data? How many data points you have, and so on and so forth. The next thing is to mention about the analysis method. How did you analyze the data? Right? So you can talk about, like, for example, if you say that you have collected interviews and you data from interviews, and then you say that I have used thematic analysis for analyzing their data. And then lastly, you need to justify your choices. This is very important. For example, if you say that I'm going to collect data through interviews, you need to justify that why it is the interviews is the right way. If you are saying that I'm going to use thematic analysis for analyzing the data, you need to justify why you are going to use thematic analysis, or why that is the right way to analyze this kind of data. For methodology section, I personally really like a diagram that shows the different steps that have been taken. It gives me a broader idea that even if I don't want to go into the depth of reading methodology, the diagram should tell me that how this research was conducted. It's always good to specify references. For example, many times the way it is identified, like there is some public data set, okay, and I'm using that data set, so I can just put in some good references that here are the relevant in recent studies in this field of study. They have also used this data set, and that is why I'm just using this benchmarking data set. Having one example to show application of each part. This is I've seen in some papers, and it's really something that I like, that if you can go from, like, take one finding and then trace it back, that how you produce this finding from the data that you have. It is really convincing. It really helps. It might not be the right way for all kinds of research, but if it is possible, this is something really looks convincing to me when there is an exemplar. The fourth part is that if you have extra material, you can always put it in the appendix. And then wherever you are submitting, just have a look at the methodology section of that journal, that how do other researchers put the methodological details, and you can follow that one as well. Now, talking about the results section. So for results section, the first thing you need to do is that, so far, just to go back, we have studied that, or we discussed how we can write abstract, how we can write introduction, how we can write literature review, how we can write methodology. Now we are talking about that how we can write the results section of a paper. For results section, the first thing you need to do is you need to divide it into sections. Now, how do you divide it? You can divide it based on, let's suppose you have 3 research questions, divided into 3 parts. You may divide it into based on experiment. Let's suppose you collect data through interviews, through questionnaire, through workshop, again 3 parts. Or it might be based on objective or the concepts and themes. Then you look at your data, the second part, and you figure out that which kind of tables and figures you're going to use to report your results. Then describe the key findings, and if it is applicable, apply statistical tests to show that the results that you have obtained are significant. Some general tips for the result section, I would say that include figures, tables and write detailed captions for them, so that even if I don't read the text of results section, the figures in itself should speak for me and tell me that, okay, what kind of results you have obtained. Then mainly, because sometimes you might end up having many results, do not try to push everything into the paper. Try to push results that are directly answering your research questions. Be short and direct. No need to unnecessarily lengthen your result section. And very importantly, as I earlier mentioned, that your results should support the claims you have made in the introduction section of your paper. Use subheadings, as I mentioned, divide into subsections, and then avoid unnecessary text. Too much of text by this part of the paper where the reader has already read, a lot of text, it would make him a bit bored. Discussion section. This is my personal favorite part in a paper. Something that I really want to see and read what the authors, they themselves, the researchers, think about the results. Here you can answer 6 questions. The first question is that what is different in your findings compared to previous research? Compare with the previous one and say what is different. Then the second question is that what is similar in your findings with respect to existing research? The third one is that how different sections of your results correlate. Sometimes the results that you obtained for research question 1 might have a very good correlation with the result that you obtained for RQ2. So just reflect on this, holistic reflection on the result section. Fourth one, what are the implications of your findings for practitioners? What are the implications of your findings for researchers? What are the threats or limitations? This is very important. None of the research that we do is complete in every aspect. There are certain threats to the findings that we have obtained. For example, generalizability. Our results might not generalize globally. Our results might be only applicable, let's suppose, in US. Or our results might, the experiment we have conducted, there might be some variables that were not in our control. So as a reviewer, when I am reading this, I know that, okay, the author know the limitations, and it's not that they have claimed as an, universal application of their results. This is a good example of discussion section, how you can write the discussion section, because this is, in my understanding, the most tricky part of a paper and the most difficult part to write. So it is always good to have some examples and then look at them and then write, take some inspiration from them and write the discussion section. Conclusion section. This is where you have the last chance to leave a mark, to impress the reviewer or to convey to the reader that you have done good research. So here what you do is that you restate the problem, you summarize the key findings, you discuss the implications. This is very important. Focus more on this part that, okay, you have obtained these results. Who can benefit from it? Is it going to impact the field? Is it going to push the boundary of knowledge in some way? Then acknowledge the limitations, suggest future research. Again, something important. Many new researchers, they would read your paper only for this part, that you have done the research. Can we build something on the top of this research or not? And then end with a strong statement that shows that the research you have done, it is important. This is an example of a good conclusion section. So you see that it has all the 6 parts that I mentioned: a problem statement, key findings, implications, limitations, future work, and closing statement. Now, let's suppose you have written the paper and then there is another researcher in your lab, or somebody wants to build research on the top of what you have produced. So you can always generate a new hypothesis based on the results that you have found for future research. So Liner, they have this hypothesis generator and hypothesis evaluator features which can definitely help you. So let's see how it works. So you see they have generated these hypotheses. You can refine them. You can even use the other evaluation feature, and you can evaluate the hypothesis. Okay, now you have written the research paper. What next? The next part is that you will have to submit it to a journal or to a conference for publication. Now, how the reviewers are going to review your paper? So what they will do is that the first thing that they will see in your research is that is it significant or not? Is the research you conducted, is it important or not? The second question they will look for is that is it new or not? Are your findings new or not? If it's not, and it's a rejection. The methodology section, in this part, they will check whether the research that you have conducted, is it conducted or executed in the right way or not? Again, you have very good findings, new problem, significant, but you have not done it in the right way, then that would be a question mark on your research. Fourth one is verifiability. Can researchers verify this research or not? Now, more recently, this is a trend that the researchers, they provide almost every information about their research so that other researchers, if they want, they can verify it. Like in my field, we provide the source code, we provide the data if possible, and we provide all kinds of scripts to give the opportunity to other researchers that if they want to verify, they have all the means and the tools to verify that how we have conducted the research. And lastly, about the presentation, that is this research presented correctly or not? This plays a very significant role in the acceptance of your paper. Sometimes very good research presented in a bad way ends up being rejected. So proofread your paper, take feedback from your peers, and then submit your paper. But the reason I'm giving you this, talking about the review of the paper is that so that you already know these questions, that they will look for these questions, and am I safe as far as answers of these questions are concerned or not? Liner also provides peer review. I particularly liked it because they almost mimic how a reviewer is gonna review your paper. Let's have a look how it works. So you see, you have uploaded your paper and it has identified weaknesses in various parts of your paper. Here you go, you upload your paper. They look for these different kind of things: novelty, rigor, clarity, impact, limitations. And then you see that they identify the strengths, that what are the parts that are good in your paper. And then comes the weaknesses, that what are the parts that are weak. Is it a major weakness or is it a minor weakness? So this way, what you do is that you take particularly the weaknesses and see that whether you can address. First, you put your own mind into it, that whether you agree with it or not. The second thing you do is that you go ahead, you address them. Once you address these weaknesses and then you submit your paper to a journal, obviously the quality of your paper would be improved. Okay, at the end, so essentially so far we have discussed that the structure of the paper and how can we write each part of a research paper. Now, at the end, what I do is that I'll just give you some best practices. So the first thing is that when I write paper, I identify 3-4 papers that are similar to what the paper that I want to write. They are either from the same conference, or the topic is the same, or they're from some fellow researchers that I admire. And then I constantly learn from them as I write a paper. The second thing is, I've seen people, they keep on waiting that everything gets perfect and then they would start writing. I don't think that is a good approach. Write, no, it shouldn't be perfect. Write. As you write, it will keep on improving. Write first and edit later. This is again something relevant to the second point. When you're writing in the first go, just write smoothly. Go ahead. Later in the second iteration, you can come in, edit, and make it better. Avoid unnecessary complexity. I'm personally not a fan of that. If something can be explained in simple words, do explain it in simple words. The fifth point is that justify your choices. I personally, when I'm reviewing a paper, I do look for that whether the choices being made, have they been justified or not. For example, if you have selected a data set, tell us why you have selected this data set. Use visuals. Text heavy papers are not very easy to read. If something can be represented in the form of a figure, in the form of a table, do use visuals. Avoid jumps, as I mentioned, that sometimes the paragraphs, the sections, they are not linked, which as a user we don't like. We as a reader, we want to be in a good flow as we are reading a research paper. Use active voice in appropriate. This is again something as a reader we connect well when the paper is written in active voice. We did this thing. We selected a data set instead of saying that a data set was selected. As far as the use of AI tools is concerned, use them responsibly, be a bit careful. My general suggestion is that something that is repetitive in nature, we should by all means go and use AI tools. The last point is that do check for plagiarism in the requirements of journal before you go ahead and submit your paper. You don't want your paper be disk rejected. Okay, what's next? So all those people who attended this webinar, again, thank you so much. And Liner will provide you with the certificates of attendance. The recording of the webinar that will also be shared with you. And lastly, a very kind of Liner that they will provide a 30-day free trial to attendees who submit a short survey that will be sent to you after the webinar. So that is it. Now we are good to have questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Fahim. Yeah, thank you everyone once again. As he mentioned, we will be sharing all the recording after the webinar. You will receive the email with the link to the recording, as well as the link to the survey. And once you complete the really short survey, you will be gifted with the 30 days free trial. Just to disclaim, Liner is a free tool, so you will still be able to use Liner, but we are giving out free trial for the Liner Pro, which is the paid subscription version today, so that you all can explore Liner really freely. Okay, let's jump into the question while we still got time. We have quite a lot of questions, Fahim. Are you able to see on your end as well?
Yes, I can see the questions.
Okay, you could also pick a best question that you might want to answer, but I have something to start with.
Okay.
Um, I have the question, I mean, there are quite a lot of ones. They say, one person asked, how can we confirm that our idea is novel and not already published? What's the best tip on that?
Yeah, so whether something is new or not, obviously you need to do a literature review, substantial literature review to make sure that others have not done or answered the same question. This is one part of the answer. The second part is that if you are a PhD student or a master's student or even a postdoc, your advisor or supervisor, professor is in a best position to give you some feedback because he has years of experience in the field. Most of the good and solid works are under his or her radar, so they can guide you whether this particular research question is it new or not.
Thank you.
We can take the second question.
Yeah, next question is somebody asked, you mentioned qualitative research and quantitative research, which are common two types of the research. Please, could you explain mixed research type if there's any?
Yeah, so there is mixed research as well, where essentially it's a combination of qualitative and qualitative. I personally have not done it, so I would not go into the depth of it. But in my understanding, in mixed research, what happens is that you do collect data from multiple ways. So let's suppose I have a research question. I first do some experiments to collect some numbers to answer my question, and then also I go and I seek some kind of data from let's suppose to interviews or to questionnaires, which also directly answer the question, and then I combine the qualitative and quantitative data to answer questions. So obviously it would be more rigorous or a better way to have question answered through data that is both qualitative and quantitative.
Thank you so much. Another question says, what advice do you have for drowning inspiration or borrowing research idea from new paper? That's
Yeah, so obviously, like I'll tell you what I used to do when I was a PhD student or even a postdoc. On my commute in the morning, as soon as I used to get on the train, I used to get these alerts from Google Scholar, and I believe now there are many other tools which send you alerts. So any research that was published in my research area, I used to get alert, and then I used to see those alerts in train. Okay, okay, this has been published, this has been published. So as a researcher, I believe it's very important that you have a good you have a radar that keeps an eye on anything new being published in your research area, in making sure that you don't end up doing the same thing as others are doing. For example, it happens to me multiple times that I would be working on a research question, and then I would see that okay, a paper has been published that answer the same question. So then I need to slightly modify the question that I'm trying to answer. Yes, Nick.
okay, thank you. And there are quite a lot of people asking the same question regarding conducting research with AI. A lot of people ask the tips when you use AI to research, avoid plagiarism, all those things. Is there
Yeah.
any tips on that? Yeah.
So my general rule is that something, as I mentioned, that if it is repetitive in nature, I prefer to use AI for that. For example, for identifying relevant research papers, when I did my first literature review during my PhD, it took me around a week just to identify the papers. Now with AI tools, you can do the same thing in 1 hour. I think there is no skill or learning in going through all the bunch of papers in a repetitive way. It's much better to use AI to give you the right set of papers. And then the where I would caution people about the use of AI, where it is learning it is where it is hitting the creativity curve, meaning that something that is very creative in nature and you are putting it on the shoulder of AI. So that is what we should not do. Then also comes the writing part. I have seen many students who use AI to write a research paper. That's it's very obvious. Like for example, if I take a paper, I read a couple of lines, I get to have the idea that is it written by AI or is it written by a person. So for that one, I would not recommend that you use AI to write your whole paper, and very likely it's going to be flagged by the journal that it is AI plagiarized. So the use cases, for example, that I have shown here, as in like for reviewing a research paper, you can always seek feedback. Some tools like, as I mentioned, that the peer review feature offliner, it's very good. But at the same time, you need to make sure that you do not upload your paper to something that is not safe. And that is like, most of the tools, they have their data safety policy. So make sure you read that and then you seek feedback from AI. But generally, just to answer it more in simple words, if it's repetitive in nature, let AI do it. If it's creative in nature, you should do it.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question asks, can you specify difference between survey paper and systematic review? As you mentioned, one is primary research and one is secondly.
Okay, so systematic literature review and survey paper, I'm not sure if I didn't specify it as primary research. Primary research is different. Survey paper and systematic literature review. So systematic literature review, it's a very comprehensive literature review. You follow a very rigorous methodology. Like in my field, computer science, there is a guideline by Barbara Ketchinham for systematic literature reviews. I use that to do, I think, 3 or 4 systematic literature reviews. It's very time consuming. You cannot be wrong at any point. If as a reviewer, I have far more space to reject your paper. For example, if your data collection, the way you have collected papers, if there is a little bit of problem, let's suppose in your inclusion criteria, in your exclusion criteria, I have all the space to reject your paper. Survey paper is more easy. It's you do not have to follow the guideline of systematic literature very strictly. You have space to collect bunch of papers, read them, and write your understanding of the field of study. So simply to answer systematic literature, you need to follow strictly the guideline of systematic literature. Survey paper, you have more freedom to write it the way you want.
Thank you so much. Another question asks, how do you actually identify the good journal? Most of the fake journals are really appealing nowadays.
Yeah, so for journal quality, there are different ways. So one is like the ranking. For example, if a journal is indexed as Q1 ranking, it's very good. If it is ranked as, let's suppose, Q2, it's also good. The second way to assess a journal is the impact factor. So depending upon the field, like in my field of study, something that has, let's suppose, an impact factor of 3 or above, we consider those as a good journals. And then also for some fields of study, they have ranking of journals. So like A, B, C. So that is another way of assessing a journal. But generally, these are the two. If it is indexed as in like Q1, Q2, if the impact factor is above 3, that those are good journals.
Okay, as the time is reaching, let me wrap this up and end the webinar. Thank you again for all to join the webinar today. As a reminder, the recording will be sent out to all of the participants as well as the survey link that you can quickly participate to receive the 30 days free trial of Liner Pro. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to the webinar at linercorp.com. You should have that under the invitation email. But yeah, thank you all for joining today. Okay, have a great rest of your day, guys.